newspaper. I remember when I was at UC Irvine, I used to do this all the time. Something happens, I would write a letter in the university newspaper, and it's a big deal, right? That okay, we're responding to this in our fashion, and we're not being defensive, we're being aggressive about it often. And of course, it comes with education. So the first thing is a child will always feel inferior if he's not educated to know that he's on the high ground. So in particular, you might think of like, let's say something comes up about terrorism. Oh, right. Muslims are terrorists and this and that. You sit down with your kids and say, let's look these things up. And you start to look up the incidents that occur in the US. Say, look, the majority of terrorism is happening from white radicals. Right. And once the kid internalizes that, I got nothing to be ashamed about. But the kid doesn't know that, and he's absorbing, maybe there is something wrong with this. Maybe we have a problem, right? That is going to be where it's dangerous. So the parent's job is to sit down with the child, have them dig deep, say, what can we do? Okay, now we have an answer, and how can we possibly disseminate this? And figure out how that works. And sometimes it's not always going to come from the child. Sometimes it needs to come from the parent, or even getting other people involved. There's no problem with calling one of the local Islamic organizations, the masjid, CARE, anyone else, saying, look, this is a problem that's existing. We need some help and some guidelines as to help how to resolve this. So, Allah.
Yeah, the schema that has been formed in the society against Islam.
Well, this is what, okay, so Sunday school is 2 hours a week, right?
Yeah.
Being very blunt, that is not going to build the proper school, right? So that's why I said the home atmosphere is very important. Do you take events in the news regularly and have your kids discuss it with them? And look, this is what's come up in the news, this is what has happened, the president has said, and let's really talk about this. Give them knowledge. Give them the tools that they feel that, man, this over year by year, we have talked about this so much, I feel like I can defend Islam. I feel like I know the truth on this matter. I'm not going to retreat when this comes up because I know the truth of the matter. So, I really want to put a lot of onus on pushback and say, look, it's a parent's job to give time and putting your kid in that environment where he's going to be able to talk about that, learn about it, and then respond to it appropriately. Wallahu a'lam.
And you know what? I think it's important to get the kids excited about Islam.
Mm-hmm.
I think they need to know that they're special. Again, I keep repeating myself with my brothers here is that doesn't mean that it develops a show of personality or personality that could be boastful to the point where it's arrogant. But make them feel that because they're Muslims, like if they walk into the classroom, the angels are going to be with them, for example.
Okay.
Give them that boost where they know their leaders. They shoot for that goal, and I don't know to what extent those tools could be used and added to what you mentioned in here, and give them something to get excited about Islam.
Okay, so I'd say two things you can do that. Number one goes back to the inferiority complex that many of us have, is we don't know what Islam offers. So the first thing is, so there's a book, and it was an exhibition at the museum a few years ago called 1001 Muslim Inventions. Have you heard of it?
Yeah.
Something like that, where you begin to tell the children, what have Muslims done in the world? We have invented this, we invented that. We had hospitals, 800 years in Europe before non-Muslims had it, right? We invented, and everyone here drinks coffee left and right in America. Muslims are the ones who invented coffee, right? We invented all these things. So that begins this process of like, we're not weak, we're strong, right? We have done this, and this. So we have a lot of contributions. That's number one. Number two is the opposite. You want to let's look at what the non-Muslims do, and let's actually begin to evaluate it, right? So let's look at the behaviors they're engaged in. Let's look at the government, that's around here, and begin to dissect it. Alhamdulillah, this is a good time for Muslims to see how disgusting kufr is, because Donald Trump is a great example, right? Really, it's a great chance. So people always say, this is a catastrophe for Muslims. I say, you know what? Allah has hikmah in everything He does. Allah is showing us that this, right, is a model. This is what's happening in the West. The values that he has, right? And so talk to your kids about that and let them see, man, I don't want to be like this. This is not the value system that I hold. Then you can start to walk through even individual things. So now we talk about alcohol, teenager. So alcohol looks really cool if you look at Anheuser-Busch commercials. Let's begin to research how evil alcohol is. And you start to look up statistics and you look at all these other things, and the kids will begin to then say, yeah, this is actually disgusting. Because the problem that we have is that the society paints a picture that all the fahisha is beautiful, right? All the things that are disgusting are actually beautiful. And it's our job is to peel away that facade and say, no, this is really disgusting, and let's show you that, right? And honestly, to be very, very blunt, sometimes there's ilm al-yaqeen, there's ayn al-yaqeen. Knowledge won't always do it. Sometimes your kids will have to taste it, and then they will see that this was actually disgusting. And that also gets to the point of being okay with your kids making mistakes. You cannot expect them to not make mistakes in the society because of the peer pressure. So if they slip, as opposed to it being a chance to grab them and to punish them, to say, let's use this as a teaching opportunity. This happened, right? This is not, we don't like that this happened, but what have you learned through this? And so that also is another way that the kid will consistently open up and not hide all the things they're doing that, that you would find objectionable. Yes.
I just want to say something really quick. So I was born and raised in this country, and I was born and raised here, but I have to say my childhood was a lot easier than what they're facing today. So,
Of course.
So what they're facing is way more, but I think one of the things that we do that kind of causes confusion is that we completely separate the two lives, right? We have this life at home, which is the Islamic culture, and then at school and what's happening at school. And I don't see it as exclusive. I mean, so there is Kofed and all of that stuff is terrible, but I think what confuses them is they're really good people. They give
course.
charity. So I always like to say there's good in everything and there's bad in everything, and you don't have to hate everything.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
incorporate what's good into your life, and so you create your own. It's not exclusive, is what I'm trying to say. It's like it's your own, right?
You're absolutely right. The challenge is for a young child to discern what is the good and what is the bad. And that is really, really tricky, because what you know as a mature adult to be wrong, they're going to look at it and might say it's good. And so, I mean, these are the really, really tricky issues that we have to be careful about. So I deal with this all the time, where some Muslim kids who are 15, 16 think that some of the really, really, like the kaba'ir are actually good things to engage in, because that's what they have been programmed with for 16 years. And so how do you get around it? I mean, adolescence is a tough time. I mean, parents have to think a lot about going back to, I'm going to harp on technology, like social media is not something that children should be on. Actually, no one should be on it, okay? Being very blunt, right? Most of the literature that you're going to find says it's very bad psychologically for you. It's not good. So when children have access to this, it is like playing with fire. You wouldn't let your 5-year-old play with fire and say, play with it, until you burn yourself. Giving a phone to an adolescent to give them access to Facebook and Instagram, Snapchat, all of the things that are out there, is almost giving your child a flame to burn themselves with. It is something you cannot regulate, because they will be bombarded with images, they'll be bombarded with messages that they don't even want half the time, and that will be part of what's programming them. So I know it sounds extreme in today's world, but even the companies, by the way, it's forbidden from the company, Instagram or Facebook, you cannot have an account before the age of 13. Right? This is an example. But we have 8, 9-year-old and 10-year-olds who have it, right? So if you want to ensure that they're not going to be, well, not ensure, but if you want to do your best to keep them away from things that they probably shouldn't be exposed to, say fine, interact with human beings. Have those non-Muslim friends, but let's make sure we'll go to their house, they come to our house, but it's in a place that we trust and we control. The online world in adolescence is something you cannot control. They're going to see images that they never wanted to see, that will pop up on their screens. And I'm just going to say that very clearly, that is a surefire way for your kids to be exposed to things that you would never want them to see. And this happens in Islamic schools too. Muslim kids who are in Islamic schools who have social media, they're engaged in the same behavior that public school kids are. So, yes.
Yeah, my question is that we are living here in America, the majority communities are white and different people, and we have no opportunity socially mixed up them, because in club we will go, they use pork, they will use sharab, and that is why we cannot participate in that.
Sure.
So our community is going by in the corner or in a hub, because we are only in the masjid and our program. We are talking about Quran, Hadith, and so. But the majority of this. So if we go out of the majority, then we will be isolated, and they will create a rumor. There's a terrorism. They are making planning. They get together to make a planning against us. So there are the chances. So how we can mix together for the main cause that we and them, just like a drug.
Sure.
We are anti-drug. They are also, some people are anti-drug. So we could combine together to okay until abortion.
Okay.
Until we are the authority, so we can combine issue together and mix together and part of the movement for them.
Okay, so you
But
have-
we are isolated.
Okay, so a couple of things I think. I think number one is that we live in a very liberal society that has its challenges and has its advantages. The advantage of it is that people are very accommodating. So I have found it very easy to tell people that they'll say, hey, can we meet for dinner? Can we do this? Can we do that, right? Non-Muslim colleagues of mine. I said, sure, but I don't drink, right? And I don't eat pork, these type of things. So if I'm gonna be in a space to ensure that that's just the way I am. And they're very, very accommodating and saying, you know what, that's fine. So I don't think we should need to say, well, because they drink and because they eat pork, we can never be around them. It's very easy to compromise with something like that, right? So neighbors, I mean, maybe this is a big point and it's a whole other presentation. One of the things in Islam that we don't talk about a lot is the obligation on your neighbors. I mean, it's one of the things the Prophet said in the hadith. He said, مَا زَالَ جِبْرِيلُ يُوصِينِي بِالْجَارِ حَتَّى ظَنَنْتُ أَنَّهُ سَيُوَرِثُ. Jibreel used to come to me over and over and over again, telling me to be good to my neighbor until I thought he was going to tell me my neighbor is going to inherit from me. Right? We don't know our neighbors most of the time. And I think that this is a catastrophe. This is un-Islamic. Right? The Muslim needs to be well known in his neighborhood. Very well known. Because that is what his deen mandates from him. If you come quietly to the masjid 5 times a day, and your neighbor just sees you leave at 5 in the morning for Fajr and 8 o'clock, and you think you're doing something great, and yet they have no idea who you are, that's not very Islamic. You know, there's a famous story of Imam Hassan al-Basri. Very good, it just touches my heart that he had a Christian neighbor. Actually, he had a Christian neighbor, and he also had a Jewish neighbor. He had got different neighbors. And when his Jewish neighbor was selling his house, he doubled the price of the house. And he said that I'm charging this double the price because to get a neighbor like this, you got to pay a lot of money, right? So even this Jewish person was like, I value this neighbor. The Christian neighbor one time had a septic tank that was leaking, and it was dripping urine into his house, and he didn't say anything, right? And the few weeks he sat in the house, he got sick because of the urine he kept cleaning up. And the neighbor came after a few weeks to visit him as he's sick, and he found out that what's going on. He smelled urine in the house, and he figured out that his septic tank was leaking. And he said, "Why did you tell me?" He said, "I didn't want to embarrass you, right? As a Muslim, my job is to maintain the dignity of my neighbor. But I wanted these stories to say that the best way to dispel Islamophobia, right? The best way for you to have like a meaningful social life as not being isolated is to get to know your neighbor. It's the easiest way for them to say, no, Muslims are good. Like, I want to be around Muslims. I enjoy being around Muslims. They're good people. Why? Because I'm in their houses. They invite me over. They come to my house. I can trust them. And until we start to do that, I don't know. We're practicing a very different version of Islam than the Prophet Muhammad came to teach. Right?
Yeah, quick comment actually. I think we create a psychological barrier with the community we live, because my observation at work, to the contrary, actually, you feel one time they want to go for team building department event for wine tasting. And we are 3 Muslims, so we said we cannot go with you guys. They changed the whole event. We end up doing cooking. They respected, and we see the amount of respect that sometimes we didn't appreciate as at the moment.
Absolutely.
The same in school. My kid in middle school, they say, "Oh, Muhammad terrorist." We talked to the principal. My son ended up actually dealing with these kids in a positive way. So I think we need to believe in ourselves. We are like flowers, Muslims, and people need us actually. So sometimes we have to engage and share we are blessing to the society and not feel the isolation. So I think we create our own barriers.
Yeah, you're right.
But people
Absolutely.
love us actually. They love Muslims. They can observe your goodness silently, and they will surprise you how much they love you, how much they care, and they want to learn from you. And they respect your rights. This society has a lot of blessing, as you said, and we need to capitalize on it.
So,
Other questions or comments? Yes.
If we prohibit kids from using the internet and social media and all this technology, my question is, how do you teach them to use it properly when they grow up? Because it's inevitable, these days that they're gonna have to run into it sometime, and it could be a problem if they're not
Great question.
aware.
So I'll separate between doing the internet and social media are 2 different things.
Okay.
Kids need to be understand technology, how to utilize technology, but at the same time, you're also wise about when you introduce it to them. So my point had to be with at what age should a child be exposed to these things? You wouldn't put a 5-year-old in front of Google and say type whatever you want, right? Because you know all types of things can happen. So you need to think about when is it appropriate. The internet has a lot of khair on it because you can do research, you use it for email, there's a million things you could do, right? But social media is very different, right? There's no need for social media in order to make your life better, right? Now, I'm not saying it cannot, but there's no inherent need. With the internet, you need it for certain things in today's life, right? So, even an adult, how many people here would say that they benefit more from social media than they waste time? Almost everybody agrees that it's a waste of time. Right? I'll just tell you it's kind of anecdotal, but like I do research, and I just did a research project, and I made a scale that didn't exist before, which has had to do with can you control your behavior on the internet? So I put an item in there that to what extent can you control how much you use social media? And then I used that to predict their test grades. This was the biggest predictor of them doing poorly in school, right? The biggest predictor of all the other things you might imagine, that their inability to regulate, because this is an addictive tool. It's like a cigarette in some ways, right? Once you start it, you can't stop using this. And there's psychological reasons why. Why is there a like button? Why is there a thumbs up? All these tools have been put in to make you addicted. A child doesn't understand that. It's the same thing like a commercial. When you show a child a commercial when he's 3 years old about McDonald's and Happy Meals, these type of things, when he's 7 or 8, he's gonna say, "Mom, I want a Happy Meal." It's like, you've never had a Happy Meal. He doesn't know why he wants a Happy Meal. But 5 years of watching commercials with Happy Meals tells him that he wants it. The same thing with social media. You don't realize that you are being programmed to come back to it over and over. You feel unfulfilled. I call it spiritual junk food. Right? If you eat Cheetos all day long, you're still hungry at the end of the day, right? You don't feel good. Right? You sit on social media all day long and you think you're talking to people and you feel lonely at the end of the day. Depression is higher today with teens who use a lot of social media. So I know it's considered to be more of a conservative opinion, but this is based on psychological research, it's based on my Islamic knowledge, is that social media has little to no benefit. The less people use it, the better off they are. So if someone is going to say that they're going to do it anyway, I mean, I can't control that. I'm only here to say what I think is best. And it does not affect your relevancy, it doesn't affect your knowledge of the world, like the news is still there, right below.
Yeah, I have a friend who works at Facebook actually, and he tells me that their meetings in the office is how to keep people engaged. And actually they provide services at zero profit.
Yes.
You know, they want you to think if you want to go to the movies, go to Facebook. It will give you all the movies next to you, rated them for you at zero profit, because they want you to stay engaged all the time in that meeting.
Now remember, whenever someone gives you something for free, just remember that there's a reason why, right?
Yes, of course.
They're using you essentially, right? And it's not for your well-being. That's very, very well known. So this is just maybe as a general spiritual reminder that people have an obsession with looking at other people's feeds. You know, if someone just wants to take a pulse of who am I? What do I value? You stop and you say, okay, I'm following this person and this person and this person and this person, and I check this person's feed and this person's feed, and I read all the comments when something. Do you read more commentary on social media, or do you read more hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? It is a very simple way to see that what do I value, and I'm reading 10,000 random quotes by people who have no knowledge, and I'm ignoring the rich knowledge that could be out there. Right? So just try to find a way to balance yourself in these type of things, and not to be extremely into this world, which I don't think is controllable, but invest in people. Build those relationships with people around you. Have a core group of friends. And if not using social media makes you not as cool, then you have to learn about that we have examples in history of people who just did things that were rebellious. Ibrahim alayhi salam was the only Muslim in his whole society. And I think a lot of times we think about Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's the gold standard. But Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba they created an Islamic state. That model we don't have today. We need to follow almost the Ibrahim model, which is I don't care what you all do. I know what's right. I know what's good for me, right? And I know that this lifestyle is better for me than what you do. And so you just got to be confident that our deen tells us better than what corporations tell us to do, essentially.
So how do you instill a sense of mission in our kids today? Kids growing up here, they're being told that their mission is this and that, and it's all along the service of community, country. But what would be an ideal sense of mission to instill in our kids to feel that that's a goal that they should move forward that would serve our deen? I mean, what would be something that would be?
Great. The first thing that I would say is that the parents have to get over that their job in life is to make their child a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. And parents like to hear that. Right? But we instill this message in kids from very, very young age. And the children view that as success. And I would pose a very frank question. Would you rather have your child be a successful doctor and die on kufr, right? Or be maybe not successful in dunya but die on iman? Of course you'd want, if you have any belief, you want him to die on iman even if he's not successful in dunya. But you have to transmit that to the child. So look, what matters most important, we want to die serving Islam. That's our mission in life, in any way possible. Now, how can you do that? So going back to this profession, programming our kids to be doctors, lawyers, and engineers does a disservice. Why? Because many of our children have different talents. Some of them want to be in arts. Some of them want to be in social science. Some of them want to be teachers and therapists and counselors and movie makers and video game designers and all kinds of things, right? What you want to do is tell your child, do whatever you want to do, as long as there's a way to serve Islam through that, right? And so here, that's that autonomy. That my identity is a Muslim. I can be a Muslim in many different ways. And I can be a Muslim and do what I want to do in my professional career. So as long as you keep doing that, that's the first thing. Second thing, it's not what you say, it's what you do. If you have your child and you are putting your kid in Kumon for mathematics, and you put your kid in robotics camp, and you put your kid in science camp, what do you think your kid, he gets the signal that what's valued in this household, what's valued in my life, is academics and mathematics. And by that nature, he understands that Quran, Islam, the deen is less important. That's the natural consequence. So you are choosing this. So you're gonna say, look, I'm gonna put you in Kumon for math. I'm also gonna make sure you're getting the same amount of Islamic instruction. So the kid realizes, well, these are both important. One of the things in Islamic schools that I found is that the teachers always complain, and the parents. The kids don't care about the Islamic studies, right? And they're in Islamic school. I say, well, why do you think they don't? Because all the parents say is, look, do good in math, do good in science, because we want you to go to a good college, and the Islamic studies, it's not really important, right? We send that signal directly to our kids. So you need to make that choice. No, what matters is deen to me. And any way which you can be a good Muslim, I'm happy with. And that requires you as a parent and me as a parent just taking a step back and saying, I know I want you to be this, but I'm going to be okay with you being something else because I want to make sure that your deen is safeguarded, right? I mean, how much talent do we waste? You brought this comment up of intermingling, right? Just by focusing on technology and not being teachers in schools, right? Not being counselors in the community, not being in the arts, we're actually losing a chance to influence society, which kids could be doing. I have a good friend of mine, he works for Pepsi in the day, he makes movies in the afternoon. But the whole purpose of it is trying to promote a positive image of Islam, right? So like, in his mind, it's like, look, I want to serve Islam any way possible, right? So let your kids, give them that every single day as they're growing up. Be whoever you want to be, as long as there's a component of serving deen. Any way you can do it is fine, right? Wallahu a'lam. Do we have time for one more? And then we'll end.
What book do you recommend? I know we have a lot of books actually on prophets and Sahabi. Something that's in English and more kind of engaging for kids. Do you have any recommendations of this book?
It's a great question. I will answer in two ways. The first is, I'll be very honest, I don't think there's a lot of good stuff out there. And we need to begin to invest in this. This has been a challenge for the last about 10, 15 years. There in the UK and in a few other countries have begun to do this more so. Now, in the meantime, I would say the best stuff out there, so there's a company that's called Good Word, is it?
Yeah.
Good Word. So they have some nice books that have prophet stories, have Sahaba stories, Sahabiyat, wives of the Prophet Muhammad. That's a starting point. There's also some media that's out there. So there's some cartoons and some videos. I forgot the name of them, but I can see if I can dig them up. Because you want to expose them from different angles. It can't just be books, right? But my big point is I'm going to argue that if you donate money to causes and to Islamic centers, also find companies that do this type of work or individuals and support them, because people are beginning to write novels and other types of tools that families can use. So.
Alhamdulillah, whenever we have been to Islamic conferences, we always buy books, and they have good supply, but I don't find like something that is kind of comprehensive when it comes to Sahabi or Prophet stories. They're either too short,
Okay.
or they're just focusing on major stuff, not their character or anything like that.
So the way that it works is, unfortunately, you make a lot more money when you write little kids books than you make older kids books. So that's why we have an empty gap. So you might almost have to jump to adult books. So there's really almost nothing for adolescents. I'll give you a couple of books that might be good. One of them, this is for teenagers that I would recommend. It's called The War Within Your Hearts, or Within Our Hearts. But this is not, sometimes people want Islamic knowledge to be in Quran and Sunnah directly, but I actually think for our youth it's more relevant to address topics that they're dealing with, so bigger topics. So this book, The War Within Our Hearts, deals with all the problems in adolescence, essentially. Talks about television, talks about relationships, talks about drugs, talks about spirituality. So it's more topically relevant to kids, I think. So that's one book that I thought was good. Who else? There's probably, anyone else have a good recommendation? There are a few other ones that are out there that are good for teens. Because my daughter's a little younger, I haven't been in that world recently. But one thing that might work is actually just as a community to have this. If there's something that is good, that there be some sort of a place, a chart that parents can list it, or in the library, the masjid should have a small little library where there's just a sample of things. So if you like it, you can post it. Right?
We're working actually on developing a children's library here.
Okay, great.
We have some books, but it's I think it will probably need to be more focused on the subjects that we want to bring in, and maybe prioritize based on the need. So inshallah, we're very happy that we're linked up to you, Brother Osman, because with all the objectives that we want to meet, inshallah, you help us along, as we develop our educational program, as we focus on the needs of the youth, inshallah, that'll be
great.
A great resource. Inshallah.
So another thing then on that point of books is don't always again look in the Islamic genre only. Again, we are dealing with challenges that are broader than core Islamic issues. So, for instance, we need to have books that address philosophical issues and bigger issues like evolution. Right? You need to have books that can deconstruct evolution for our children, or feminism, or secularism, because that's actually more important than having the kid memorize a few hadith here or knowing ayat here and there. Right? That's good. But it's not fundamentally important. What's fundamental is that your worldview is Islamic. That it's rooted in, it's not coming from all these secular traditions altogether. So make your library very broad, that are topics that the children are probably dealing with every single day. Yeah. And I am trying to, maybe I'll share with Adib, so I am trying that process. So I've written a novel about Prophet Sulaiman's life that's supposed to be Harry Potter-ish, kind of to compete with the existing stuff. It's a story of miracles. There's superpowers. There's jinn. There's these things. So that is one way that I think kids will begin to find interest in Islam, because a lot of the stories are written they're translated and they're not very exciting. So I think the next 5-10 years we'll see a lot happen.
Well, just a general question at the higher level here in terms of coordination and planning forward. I'm sure you are connected to a network of like-minded people and planning ahead for a lot of the Muslim communities in here. How much progress do you think, or is there a general direction you feel that the Muslim communities could move in based on guidelines that the people that are responsible, that have knowledge, are setting for these communities, or is it still individual levels and not a collection of resources that are planning forward? I'm curious to know if there's any.
No, there are. The answer is both. So there are large organizations that have taken on this initiative. So one of them is like Yaqeen Institute. Some of you might have heard of. This is Sheikh Omar Sulaiman out of Texas. It is a think tank essentially, but the idea is to produce high-level content that is dealing with, for instance, how to address doubts that Muslims are having about Islam, how to inculcate, iman and spirituality, and there's another division I forgot. But the point is, this on their website, they have tons of resources which they have packaged for free as almost like a curriculum for children. So they're more geared for, I'd say, college kids and up, but I think that capable high school students could handle it. But that's a strategic initiative. What they did was they took survey data to see that what do Muslims believe in? What are the challenges that they're facing? And then they're trying to create content that's specific for those challenges. So I would say that's one example. The other example I would say is that there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution. The Muslims are so diverse throughout the country that what works in Texas or in Indiana is very different than something in California. So what we want to do actually is sit down with probably some of those people at a higher level, give them your specifics, and take some advice on what could you do that would work best. How could you tailor the content and tailor your community to your specific needs, but still keeping those big principles in mind? And if you ever want to help with that, I can always put you in touch with folks. So, inshallah.
A lot of work.
Good. So I'll end. If there's any questions, of course, I'll be here afterwards. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make our children strong in their iman. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us parents who can role model our kids. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and protect our iman. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's gathered us here today to gather us in the highest gardens of Jannah. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.
How are we going to do salat this week? We're going to move the church.
No salat today. We're off today.
Is pressure here?
You can have lecture on Salah.
So it's good.